They fired me on a Tuesday. I remember because it was raining, one of those cold, unremarkable Chicago rains that makes everything feel heavier. I sat across from the HR director, watching her avoid my eyes as she read from a script she didn't write. The words were clinical. Precise. Stripped of truth. Due to recent performance concerns, your employment with Blackwell & Gentry is being terminated effective immediately. Performance concerns. After 10 years of spotless audits, after staying late through tax seasons and merger deadlines, after cleaning up messes no one else wanted to touch, now I was being walked out like a liability. No warning. No explanation. Just a form, a signature line, and 2 security guards waiting outside the glass door like I was dangerous. I signed without asking questions. What was the point? The decision had already been made, and I wasn't there to argue. I had already done what I came to do. What they didn't know, what Richard Blackwell, the CEO I'd worked under for a decade, didn't know, was that I'd been ready for this. That I'd already sent 2 encrypted USB drives, one to the IRS Whistleblower Office, and another to my personal attorney. They thought they were erasing me. But I had written myself into every ledger they forgot to hide. So I walked out that day with nothing in my hands but everything in motion. They thought this was the end of my career. It was only the beginning of theirs unraveling. I was 31 when I walked through the doors of Blackwell & Gentry for the first time. Freshly licensed as a CPA. Nervous in a cheap blazer. Carrying a second-hand leather briefcase and an ironclad determination to prove I belonged. No Ivy League degree. No family connections. Just years of night classes, a mountain of student debt, and a resume built from internships and community college tutoring jobs. It was supposed to be temporary. A stepping stone. But that first week changed everything. I remember walking into the break room and seeing Richard Blackwell himself pouring coffee. He was the face of the firm, elegant, sharp, magnetic in the way powerful people often are. I froze. He noticed, smiled, and said, "Jennifer, right? I heard you caught a tax misclassification in the Blanchard file." Good eyes. He knew my name. My work. My worth. And just like that, I was hooked. From there, it felt like I'd found my place. Richard took me under his wing. Invited me to senior meetings I had no right to be in. Asked for my opinion in front of partners. Called me his sharpest mind in a room full of sharp suits. He made me believe I wasn't just another accountant, I was essential. I stayed late. I skipped vacations. I redlined reports at midnight, fixed other people's errors without credit. When clients got skittish, Richard sent me to calm them down. I became his fixer, on paper, in numbers, and eventually, in the unspoken politics of the firm. For 10 years, I gave everything to that job. My time. My loyalty. My belief. The office became my second home. The firm, my family. And Richard? He wasn't just a boss. He was the one person I never thought would lie to me. My father passed away during my 5th year at the firm. Richard sent flowers to the funeral and gave me 2 weeks off without it counting against my leave. "Take the time you need," he told me. "This place will still be standing when you get back." It felt like kindness. It felt like safety. So when the promotions came slowly, I didn't mind. When the bonuses stalled due to economic uncertainty, I accepted it. I believed him. I trusted that loyalty would pay off in the long run. And maybe that's why, when I first saw the discrepancy, just a small, misaligned vendor entry, I didn't think fraud. I thought it was a mistake. A glitch. Something someone else had missed and that I, as usual, would quietly clean up. But it wasn't a mistake. It was a thread. And I pulled it. Not knowing it would unravel everything I thought I knew about the man who built my career. And the company I thought I'd grow old with. The first discrepancy was a payment for $24,870. It was coded under consulting, external, and attached to a generic invoice. No name, no description, no statement of work, just an account number tied to a shell LLC called Ian Strategies. At first glance, it didn't raise alarms. We used a dozen contractors every quarter. But Ian Strategies wasn't in our vendor database. No tax ID, no contract record, nothing in the compliance folder. So I dug. I emailed the associate listed on the expense form, just a polite question, "Can you confirm who approved this vendor?" The reply came 6 hours later. One line, "Richard said it was urgent, told me to fast track." I read it twice. Then I flagged the payment and saved a copy offline. The second payment came up 2 days later. This time, Vera Consulting Group. $31,200. Same format. Same vagueness. Same origin, authorized by Richard Blackwell. I started pulling expense reports from the last 2 years. Then 5. It took 3 nights and 2 large thermoses of coffee to cross-reference it all. By the time I was done, I'd identified 17 different entities with no legitimate vendor records. 17. All with names bland enough to pass unnoticed. All linked to offshore accounts, Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, even Belize. Altogether, the total was staggering, $7.2 million. $7 million. Moved in small amounts, none large enough to trigger automatic audit flags. All signed off under strategic consulting or international advisory. It was genius, in its own way. Richard had built a system that was invisible unless someone traced every thread and connected the dots. There were no sudden jumps, no missing funds, just small, steady leaks under the floorboards. And it had been happening for years. I printed every transaction. Built a spreadsheet that tracked the frequency, the destination, and the signer. Then I cross-referenced it against internal approvals. Each one had a signature. And every signature was Richard's. For a few days, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe there was a reason. Maybe it was part of a classified project. Maybe someone else had access to his credentials. But the further I went, the fewer explanations made sense. These weren't authorized expenses. These were siphons, set up, protected, and disguised with expert precision. I stared at my screen, heart pounding. It wasn't just that someone was stealing from the company. It was that my mentor, the man who told me to trust the numbers, had been orchestrating it. I didn't sleep that night. Or the next. Instead, I scanned every page. Saved every backup. I encrypted a USB drive and labeled it plainly, Client 42071, Internal Audit Reference. I knew what I was doing. And I knew what it could cost me. When I finally confronted Richard, I did it the only way I knew how, professionally. I walked into his office, shut the door behind me, and placed a folder on his desk. "I came across some discrepancies in the consulting payments," I said. "I believe you'll want to review them. Some of the vendor accounts appear off-record." He glanced at the folder but didn't touch it. Just leaned back in his chair and smiled, cold, unreadable. "Jennifer," he said slowly, "I've always appreciated your attention to detail." That should have comforted me. It didn't. He continued, voice calm but flat. "But sometimes, too much digging leads people to make assumptions." "Assumptions based on documentation?" I asked. His eyes narrowed. "Leave it with me," he said. "I'll handle it." That was it. No thanks. No questions. No follow-up. I left the office with a knot in my chest. I knew what was coming next. I had pushed too far. Seen too much. That night, I uploaded the full case file to my personal encrypted cloud. Then I sent 2 packages by courier, one to the IRS Whistleblower Office, and one to my attorney. Inside were printed reports, USB drives, and a signed statement outlining the pattern of financial misconduct. Each package included the same final line. This report was prepared independently by Jennifer Martinez, CPA, former senior accountant at Blackwell Gentry, in accordance with U.S. tax and corporate law. I wasn't just protecting my career anymore. I was protecting the truth. Because if there's one thing I've learned in a decade of auditing billion-dollar accounts, it's this. Numbers don't lie. But people do. 3 days after I placed that folder on Richard's desk, I was summoned to HR. No context. No explanation. Just a calendar invite marked mandatory. I knew what it was. I still arrived on time, dressed sharp, not because I had hope, but because dignity isn't something you hand over, even when the ending's written. The HR director was already seated, joined by a compliance officer I'd never seen before. On the table sat a single-page termination letter, pre-printed with my name in bold. Not a word about fraud. Nothing about whistleblowing. Just the phrase, performance-based separation. After 10 spotless years. I read the page without reacting. My hands were steady, but my pulse tapped at my collarbone like a warning bell. This isn't personal, the director said. Of course not, I replied. They offered 2 weeks severance. I didn't ask for more. I didn't ask for a reason. I just signed, slid the paper back across the table, and stood. As I stepped outside the HR suite, a security guard was already waiting. I recognized him, Marcus. We'd chatted every morning for years. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He walked me to my desk, watched silently as I gathered the framed photo of my mother, a coffee mug from an accounting conference, and a set of highlighters I'd brought from home. No one said goodbye. No one asked why. In the elevator, Marcus finally whispered, "I'm sorry." We weren't told why either. I didn't answer. Because I knew exactly why. I had confronted a man who believed power made him untouchable. I had walked into his office with facts, not fear. And for that, I had become a liability. But what Richard didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the moment I slid that folder onto his desk, I'd already crossed the line. The evidence was out of my hands. The story was already in motion. And the truth? It was no longer mine to carry alone. The first week of unemployment was quiet. Too quiet. My inbox went still. No messages from colleagues. No curious texts asking if I was okay. The silence told me more than words ever could. They weren't just letting me go. They were erasing me. I updated my resume. Polished my LinkedIn. Reached out to a handful of people I had mentored, supported, even covered for over the years. Most of them didn't respond. The ones who did were vague. Polite. Hesitant. One even said, "I don't know what happened, Jennifer, but maybe it's best to let this one go." Let it go. As if losing 10 years of work, my credibility, and my reputation was something I could brush off like a bad haircut. I applied for jobs. No interviews. No callbacks. The financial world is smaller than people think. Whispers move faster than facts. And Richard? He had resources. Lawyers. PR handlers. A polished face he knew how to wear in front of the world. Me? I had a cardboard box of personal belongings, and a story no one was ready to believe. Except the IRS. I didn't hear back immediately, of course. The whistleblower process is designed to be discreet. But my attorney confirmed that the documents had been logged, timestamped, and acknowledged by a compliance agent. I had done my part. The rest was out of my control. So I waited. 2 months passed. I burned through my savings slowly, cutting back where I could. No more fresh-cut flowers on the counter. No more fancy coffees. I turned down a family reunion I'd been planning to fly to for over a year. Next time, I said. At night, I reread the case files. Not out of obsession, but to remind myself, I hadn't imagined it. The numbers were real. The theft was real. The fraud was undeniable. And I wasn't crazy. But that didn't stop the doubt from creeping in. What if nothing happened? What if Richard buried it? What if I became just another woman in finance who was too aggressive, too obsessed, too difficult? It was a Tuesday morning when everything changed. I was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping black coffee, trying to decide whether I could afford to renew my CPA license that month, when my phone buzzed. FBI conducts raid on prominent Chicago firm, CEO in custody for financial crimes. I stared at the headline for a full 30 seconds before I clicked it. There it was. Photos of agents in windbreakers carrying boxes out of Blackwell and Gentry's glass tower. Footage of Richard being led to a black SUV, his wrists cuffed, his face turned away from the camera. My mouth went dry. I scrolled further. According to sources, the case had been built around an anonymous whistleblower who provided detailed documentation of years-long embezzlement and tax fraud. The evidence included internal audits, bank records, and a memo addressed directly to the CEO. I knew that memo. I'd written it. Before I could process the rush of vindication or relief, my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Ms. Martinez? The voice was calm, professional. This is Special Agent Clark with the Department of Justice. I'm calling to personally thank you. The documents you submitted were instrumental in initiating our case. Your work laid the foundation for a successful prosecution. I didn't know what to say. I had imagined this moment 100 times. None of those imagined versions included me standing barefoot in my kitchen, wearing yesterday's sweatshirt, heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. You may be eligible for a financial award under the IRS Whistleblower statute, he added. Your attorney will be notified in due course. Thank you, I managed. That means a lot. He paused. I hope you know, we don't always get whistleblowers with your level of clarity. Or courage. When we ended the call, I stood in the silence of my apartment for a long time. Then I walked to my bookshelf and pulled out the folder, the original copy. The one I had almost burned out of fear. I opened it. Page 1, the transaction that started it all. $24,870 to Ian Strategies. I smiled. Just a little. Not because I'd won. But because I hadn't backed down. They had fired me. Silenced me. Discredited me. But the truth? The truth was louder. And now, the whole city could hear it. By noon, the headlines were everywhere. FBI raid shakes finance giant. CEO Richard Blackwell indicted on 14 counts of fraud and embezzlement. Source close to the case says, the evidence was undeniable. My phone lit up for hours, texts, missed calls, voicemails from numbers I hadn't seen in years. Former coworkers, college classmates, even distant cousins I hadn't heard from since high school. Everyone wanted to talk now. Everyone suddenly remembered my name. But I didn't reply. I didn't need anyone's congratulations. I wasn't looking for praise. I was watching the empire fall. The coverage grew more damning by the hour. Leaked documents. Agent interviews. Former board members releasing statements of shock and disappointment. And through it all, my work was the silent foundation under every headline. My numbers. My charts. My words. They didn't name me publicly. But behind the scenes? They knew. By the end of the week, my attorney received official notice from the IRS. My whistleblower reward, based on the total tax liabilities recovered, would amount to just over $682,000. I stared at the number on the letter and laughed, not out of joy, but out of disbelief. They'd taken my job, my reputation, and my stability. But now? I had all of it back, and more. And then came the call from the firm's board of directors. It was the interim chairwoman, voice measured, polished, and just a little shaky. We'd like to meet with you, Jennifer. In person, if you're willing. The board would like to offer a formal apology and a proposal. I agreed to meet. Not because I needed their apology. But because I wanted to see how they'd look me in the eye. We met in the same boardroom where Richard once handed me my promotion letter. The energy was different now. Heavy. Uncertain. The chairwoman stood as I entered. So did the others. Not out of obligation, but out of respect. We were wrong, she said plainly. We failed you. I didn't respond. I waited. We'd like to offer you the opportunity to return, she continued. Not as an employee. As CEO. The room went silent. I looked around. Some of these people had avoided me in the hallway months ago. Some had whispered behind closed doors. But now? They were asking me to lead what Richard had nearly destroyed. I didn't say yes. Not right away. Because this offer wasn't about power. It was about principle. So I asked one question: if I return, do I have full authority to rebuild everything from the inside out? They exchanged glances. Then nodded. Yes. That was all I needed to hear. I walked back into Blackwell and Gentry on a Thursday morning. No security escort this time. No cardboard box. No HR script waiting behind a conference table. Just me. And a keycard that now opened the top floor. The glass doors of the executive suite whispered shut behind me. The office hadn't changed, same skyline view of the Chicago River, same polished mahogany desk, same marble nameplate that used to read Richard Blackwell, Chief Executive Officer. It was gone now. The shelf where he'd displayed his awards and framed press clippings had been cleared, leaving behind faint outlines and forgotten dust. I didn't bring plaques or trophies. Just one thing, my framed CPA license. I pulled it from my bag and hung it on the wall. Right where his top 40 under 40 used to be. Not as a flex. As a reminder. That the systems we trust, corporate, legal, personal, don't break overnight. They erode slowly, under the weight of complicity. One unchecked payment. One forced silence. One woman ignored until she isn't. In the weeks that followed, I got to work. I dissolved the old audit team and rebuilt it from the ground up. I implemented a zero-tolerance whistleblower protection policy, with anonymous reporting channels that went directly to an external firm. I rewrote the conflict of interest disclosures, restructured vendor contracts, and made our books more transparent than they'd ever been. Some people left. Some weren't happy. That was fine. I wasn't there to be liked. I was there to make sure no one ever got erased the way I had. A few months later, during a quarterly all-hands meeting, I stood in front of 200 employees in the main conference hall. I told them the story, not just of Richard, but of the silence that let him operate for so long. And of the woman who almost convinced herself to stay quiet. I was afraid, I told them. Not of being wrong, but of being right and still not being believed. They listened. Some nodded. Some didn't move. But all of them understood. Because they'd seen it happen. To others. Maybe to themselves. After the meeting, a young analyst I'd never met approached me. She couldn't have been more than 26, still carrying that wide-eyed look of someone trying to make herself small in a big world. Thank you, she said quietly. I didn't know someone like you could end up here. I smiled. You mean someone like you, I said. Because that's what scared Richard the most. Not me. But the idea that someone like me could pull the curtain back. Could document everything. Could walk out with the truth in her hands. And come back stronger. This wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. Of truth. Of trust. Of the idea that doing the right thing doesn't have to cost you everything. And if it does? You fight anyway. Because someone else is watching. Someone else is doubting herself. And maybe all she needs is to see that silence isn't safety. That the truth is still worth writing down. Still worth sending. Still worth standing for. Even when they try to bury you. Especially then. Because the deeper they bury you, the more powerful it is when you rise. And when I stood in that office, mine now, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt ready. To lead. To rebuild. To make sure the lights never went off again. And that no voice like mine would ever be silenced again. And that's how I learned that living well is the best revenge. Did this story hit home? Tell me what you would have done in the comments. Like the story? Subscribe for more true stories of karma and quiet power. And send this to someone who believes in receipts over rage.